All right, and we're back, and it's COMP2068 in Winter 2016, Advanced Web Programming, and it's week 10, part 2 of our broadcast. The last broadcast, what we did was we talked about coffee. Yeah, I like the coffee comment. We talked about things like, the what's due for your final project. And this one here, what we're going to be doing with is this piece. I want to finish off the stuff we were working on last day. I'm working from a project that is COMP2068 Mongo demo, and that's the one that's online. Let's take a look at online. Second. So if I go to online, and if I go to Georgian, and I go to Mongo demo, right? So this is the one. This is something we updated like 7 days ago. Okay, so that's the project I'm working with right now. Remember last time we got together, we did this passport local Mongo, passport local Mongo, Mongo kind of project, which is a very simplified project to kind of log in and log out. Right? We're going to use the same basis, the same stuff we did here in this project. We're going to do it by updating our project and making it so that you have to authenticate yourself to see the users and all that kind of stuff, right? So you can do articles on your own, but when it comes to actually doing user administration, you have to be authenticated. And in order for us to do that, we have to set up the authentication system. Okay, so that's kind of our plan for today. If we have time after this is done, we can look at Angular. We can start off Angular. And again, I'm hoping that you've done your Code School Angular. So if I go to angularjs.org, and if I go to Learn Free Course, then hopefully you guys have done the free course here at Code School. Okay, so this is where it is, shipping up with Angular. And it's kind of the course that's built into Angular with the Flatlanders. Not going to go over that today right now, but I will talk about this as we go forward. Let's talk about this Mongo demo that we're going to be looking at right now and modify it for our purposes, right? So the first piece we have to modify when we look at our Mongo demo, remember we want to include not just our mongoose, but something called Passport. And Passport was the thing that allows us to do things like, use mongoose or Mongo, the Mongo database, to house our users that we're going to use, okay? That's the first thing we want to look at. So we've got most of the pieces in place, right? We've got our express up here, we've got our path, as an example here, right? And what we also have is, just pull up my notes here just to make sure that we're on the right page. And there's quite a few of them today. We're going to go into different piece parts. I'm looking at my app.js file. That's what I'm looking at right now. And if you notice, again, we have a reference path or express. We also have our, the favicon, which is kind of, we're not really using that right now. Logger, cookie parser, body parser. We're adding mongoose. This is where we connect to our Mongo database right here. This is where we do it. And then underneath that, we have a session variable, right, that we have. Here's our session. Right, where we require express session. Again, I'm going to move this one down a little bit. So right now we have our mongoose, right? And what I want you to do with me is, let's put the other pieces into play. One thing I want to do is I want to have a reference to our user database. And here's our user that we kind of created last time. So I'm going to put a comment for user, right? I'm going to do an import. And what I want to do is I want to use my user model. I want to call my user model. Import our user model, which is we're going to require, and it's going to be .models and then user. And the reason for this is because as we import our user model, right, what we want to try and do with this is modify everything, right, our user model, so that way we use our users as the users that are going to log in. So we're going to do this. Now, one thing that just hit me in the head is if I want to use Passport local mongoose, the problem we have last time is we don't have any code hinting for this. We don't have any a proper TypeScript definition library for this. Now I've created one in a companion project I made, Mongo Demo 2. And what I'm going to do before I start off even is I'm going to take my typings for this one. So I'm just going to go in there. So I've got a bit of a snippet that I want to use, right? So I'm going to go into under my typings for this one. Right, so notice I've got no modules, my server, modules, and so on, and then there's typings. And under typings, you notice that I have this Passport local mongoose. Here's Passport local mongoose, And I also have it here. If you look at my typings, I kind of created my own Passport Local Mongoose that we didn't use, but my Passport Local Mongoose here is a little incomplete. And what I've done is I've worked on it a little bit more, right? So here it is. I'm going to open this up with another program. We're going to use Text Wrangler for now. And you can see I've modified this considerably to make it work. So I'm going to kind of take this Passport Local Mongoose typing that I kind of created, and I'm going to slap it in here so that we can get good code hinting for Passport Local Mongoose, because that way we can get all the type we need. Okay. If we don't have this, then when it comes to using TypeScript, we won't get the code support or type support that we need to make our this new module work. All right. So I'm going to save this thing. I'm also going to save my app.ts. And for now, before I run anything, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up onto GitHub, right? And I'm going to upload this. I'm going to say added Passport Local Mongoose type definition file. All right. And I'm going to put this, you're going to see that there's a modification of it, actually. Instead of that added, we'll see modified. And we'll add that as a comment, and we'll go up and push this up to GitHub. Okay, it pushes up to GitHub. So that's the first thing we've done. So now you should have that. If you go up to GitHub, you'll have that piece in there, and that means you'll have my type definition libraries for this one. Okay. Okay, cool. So that's the first thing. Now I've put my user model in here. I've commented it out, and the reason why is because our user model is kind of incomplete. Even though we're going to update our app.ts, the first thing we need to do is update my user model so that it uses everything we need, right? So let's go into my user model here, because without this, we're going to be kind of, listless. And I'll explain this in a second. Make sure that I have in my notes my user model, and I do. There it is. Okay. So in my user model, if I take a look at this right now, so let's take a look at our user model. We're going to go to Server, Models, and under User, we have this. This is just our user schema. And this is good and all, but I think what we need to do here is start adding in our Passport Local Mongoose. Now, remember, my version of my document, I've already added in all the NPM requirements. So all the, the NPM modules for Passport, Passport Local, and Passport Local Mongoose are already here. Okay, so you don't have to do that yourself. Just to make this a little quicker. So I'm going to go import, and then I'm going to type in Passport, right, Local Mongoose. And Passport Local Mongoose is going to require, right, Passport-Local-Mongoose. Right, that's going to require it. And if you notice, I'm not getting any errors. So it kind of understands what Passport Local Mongoose is. If I didn't have a type definition file for this, then I would get errors for this one. Okay, cool. Not going to change any of this. The only thing I'm going to do is at the bottom, just before we do our export for our model, right? And notice that I have a couple of things that I'm doing. I've got my, I'm exporting my user. But what I really also want to do is talk about my user model. So I'm going to say var, declare a variable called options. And this variable options is going to be, we're going to use one of these. We're going to kind of create a variable that is encompassing these two things, missing password error, right? We're going to kind of put that as wrong password. We're going to set this up. We're going to finish some of this next week. Okay, that's the first piece. That's going to be our custom error message for when we miss a password, if the password is wrong. Okay. The next piece is our user schema. We're going to use the plugin that's built into Passport, all right, or Mongoose to have this come in, right? And we're going to pass in Passport Local Mongoose, right, with our options into the schema. So again, options first, then our plugin, and this piece here is going to enable Passport Local Mongoose to almost extend the user schema to add in Passport Local Mongoose into it, which is really kind of key. So that's the first thing. So our user model has been updated. Let's just go into GitHub and do that. So I'm going to say plus, and I go in here and say updated user model. Plus, and we're going to push this up to GitHub. Now, we don't know if this is working right now. And the way always to check as we iterate through this whole process, and this is what I highly recommend to you, is that you are you run this in the browser. So you run gulp and everything else as we're doing this. So let's do this. When I kind of open in terminal, let's try that again. Open in terminal. All right, and let's close this off. So now we're looking at Mongo demo, right? So we want to run gulp, and with gulp, it's going to pull up our web page. This is our current web page. Notice that we have home, products, services, articles, and we also have users. Now users, I've already done some testing here, and I've got a user called new user and Brackus and a bunch of other people here that I've got going on. I'm going to get rid of some of these users in a second, just so that way we don't have any users at all, right? So let's go in here and modify this. I'm just going to delete all my users, right? So there's a reason for there's a method to my madness. We'll see in a second. So delete the user, and let's go in here and delete this user too, and even go into delete this one too. So we delete all my users. All my users are gone. No more users. Yay. All right. One thing I don't want to do is when we log in finally, I don't want ever to have access to my users unless I'm logged in. I don't want to have access to that. So that we have to create a protection in order for us to stop that from happening, right? Almost like an authorization little a means of authorizing our users first and knowing that they're logged in before hiding this particular section. Okay. All right, let's take a look at what we've got so far. So it looks to me that the way it is, our project so far is working. Everything's fine. It all works, and we're good to go. If I look at my what I'm getting here in my code on the terminal, it looks like there's no errors. The only errors I'm going to get is this one silly error that I'm getting for gulp running nodemon, and that's not really an error. That's just me running gulp in the background and nodemon. Okay, so that's not really an error. Not for our project. Okay, cool. So that's the first piece. So our project is running as is, and all we've done is we've updated the user model. Once we've updated the user model, I've got to pass that information back into app.ts like I was doing. So now let's go back. So now we have a user model that's updated. I can go into app.ts, here it is, and put this back in. So here's our user model. Cool. Our user model now includes, it's actually being shared on app.ts, so I can start using it here. Okay, next is I want to not only import the user model, but I also want to import a user, capital U, and that's going to be equal to the user model, right, dot user, right? So that's what it is. And what this is going to say is, hey, take the user model user that we're exporting out of the user model, and now we're going to use it in a local variable called user that's inside my app.ts. Okay, it's important we do this or else we will do the next piece. Okay, here's my import session. So I'm importing my session variables here. I'm doing flash messages here, and this is the perfect place to put in passports. Okay, so let's put the passport pieces in here. All right, so I'm going to go import passport. My little boy is bored out of his head today because he stayed home from school. Passport is equal to require. Stop, Alexander. Thank you. All right. All right, and so passport local, and we're going to say passport. Passport, and so what this does is it includes the passport module inside my app.ts file. Okay, so I need to do this. Then I'm going to access I'm going to call something called passport local. And what that is, it's going to require, I'm kind of bringing this out into two parts. It's going to require passport dash local. All right. Now notice, like normally when you see passport local, you have almost like a strategy that's tacked on to the end. I don't have to do it in one line. I can do it in two lines here. So I'm going to say import local strategy, right? Local strategy equal to passport local, right? Passport local dot strategy. And you see how that comes up in cone hinting, which is kind of cool, right? So that's all my passport piece right in. So this is kind of all the authentication pieces ready to go. We've just kind of put them in place into my app.ts. We haven't done any authentication yet. We're just putting them into place. We haven't modified the roots or anything in there, but this is the first piece. Okay, we're going to skip down to the next section, right? So we're going to skip down past where it says we're setting it up. We're going to move this to, so we're going to take a space away from line 38. Leave it the way it is right here. We've declared our Express app. And then as we move past session, so as we move past this app.use session area, right? And before we initialize our flash messages, we want to app use passport. All right, so just after the session, we're going to go app.use, and then their passport dot initialize. And when we call passport initialize, this initializes the passport, the whole passport system, if you will, the registration and the authentication. And we're also going to say app.use passport session. So we're going to use passport session protocol for passport. So it's going to store login and log out information, whether the user is serialized or deserialized, here in the session. Okay, so that's the second thing we're going to do. Okay, so that's still our app.ts here. Okay, so once we've done that, we're going to initialize our Flash. And what Flash does, again, is it gives us these Flash messages that come up, which are kind of neat, right? Then we have our static path. And then right underneath that, we're going to configure our passport. So first we declare, initialize our passport. And then after we do the static path, it has to be right here. And before we do our routes for users and articles, we're going to initialize or configure our passport. So here's our passport config. Now remember, some of this stuff can be broken out into different files. We're just making it in one big file to make it easy. So passport config. And inside our passport config here, we're going to say passport.use. And inside there, we're going to say a new local strategy, right? Which is what we define above, with user.authenticate to be passed in. Notice how that all works nicely. And this is because of the code ending that I built in when I wrote that type definition library for passport local mongoose, right? And then passport.serialize user. Oh, that's, yeah, serialize user, that's right. And we're going to use the user.serialize user to pass in. Just like we did last time. It's actually identical to the process we did last time for our simple example. And then we're going to go passport.deserialize user, right? And we're going to use user.deserialize user. We're going to pass that in there. So that those are the, when we use the user model, we're using the user model to serialize and deserialize the user. So that's pretty cool. We've got most of it working right now just by doing this little passport config piece, right? Okay, further down, we do our routes. We connect to our database, which I've partitioned to a separate file now, right? We have our Mongoose connection, which connects to our, again, to the Mongo database, our Mongo lab, right? And then we're getting right into the error. So really, we're done. Our app.ts finished, finito. So if I stop this, and if I notice that it restarts, and if everything goes well, we should have access back into Mongo lab. And if that's true, that means that our app is working. And if I refresh the page, you still have access. I still can look at users, which should be blank now, articles, which should have one little article, and so on. But more or less, we're ready to go. And we don't have any errors. That means in our app.ts, all the changes we made in our app.ts has 0 errors in it. That's great. So we're preparing our app.ts in order for us to be able to do authentication. Okay, so that's the first piece. Okay, once our app.ts is done, we need to upload the changes to GitHub so we can see that our app.ts has been done on time. So we're going to go here. Notice these are all the things we modified. We're going to go up to here, and we're going to say updated app.ts for passport authentication. That's one thing we did. We're going to upload that, and we're going to push that to GitHub. So we're going to have that push up on GitHub. Now, this is a great example. This file that I'm using, this Mongo demo that I'm giving you, you can certainly base your final project off this file if you want to, because it's going to have, I mean, I'm giving you the points. You're going to have authentication in there. You're going to have access to your database, the whole thing. Okay? So it's not like you have to reinvent the wheel here. Okay? That would be kind of mean, right? To make that happen. All right. Now the difficult part. Okay, one of the difficult parts we need to do is we need to talk about our index.ts in our routing. Our routing is the next difficult piece, and it's going to take a little bit of time. We may have to break this out into a couple of different sections, videos, only because it takes a little bit of time to get this all done. Again, my goal is to get the authentication piece working, and sometimes it's a little tricky. Even if I've written it down, I have notes and everything else, I may mistype something. It's not that difficult to mistype something, and then we're off, right? So let's put this into this thing and see how we can go. All right, so what I want to look at next, and we're going to do one step at a time, is I want to look at the, I'm going to kind of close all these down for a second just to make it so that it's easier for us to absorb this stuff, right? And we're still looking at server. We're done with models. We don't want to touch models anymore. I want to go to routes, and we want to go to the index, the main route, index.ts. So route index. Okay, so here we have our routes, and they're cool and all, right? But we want to start adding additional information in here, right? Because it's not enough a lot of times to add in our, so make sure that I have the right routes, because that would be bad. Routes user, talk about routes index. That's what I'm saying. If you don't pay attention, bad things happen. Okay, so what I want to do here is I want to look at what I have already. Notice that I have my user, which is a require user, but this isn't enough. This is actually wrong. What I want to do here, and it's not going to break anything if we change anything right now, but I'm going to start adding things from the top. So I have my import express. I need that. I have my SendGrid. I talked about that last week and how to set up SendGrid for yourself. I have my express router, but I'm missing passport. If I don't have a reference to passport, then I can't do things that passport enables me to do, the passport object. So I'm going to say passport is equal to require passport. Right? Just so that we have the ability to do things like request response and all that kind of stuff with passport. Okay, that's one thing. So I want to kind of add that in. That's one of the changes. The next change I want to add in, once I've added this piece in, is I want to modify access to my database references to my models, right? So this is cool, but I don't want to make it this one. I don't want to do a var, and I don't want to do a var, and I don't want to do a var. I want to do as many times as I can. I want to do imports. So this will be import, and instead of user being the thing I'm going to import, just like we did with the other one, is I want to do a user model. A user model is my model's user, right? That's the first thing. And then what I want to do is I want to import my user, capital U, which is equal to user model dot user. So notice I'm getting that code hinting because of the way I've written my model, right? So I've got user, capital U here, that I can use when I do things like registration, login, logout. Okay, res render is good. So when I go to my main page, I'm rendering my page. But one thing I also need to start doing is I want to start putting in my my display name, because when I log in, I'm going to have a display name. So I'm not going to just have a title, which is home, but I'm also going to have a second property to my to the the information I'm sending across called display name. Now this is part of my user model, and I'll show you this in a second. I want to check to see if if rec user exists, right? If rec user exists, then I want to add. Let me just break this down over a couple of lines so you guys can see this. Here's my title, and then here's my display name. And when I'm kind of using the ternary operator here, I'm saying if rec user exists, then if it's true, then rec user dot display name, right? So what I'm saying is rec user dot display name is what I'm passing in. All right, so that's what display name is. So if rec user is true, then I'm passing in the display name. However, if it's false, if there is no rec user, then pass in nothing. Right, so check to see if user exists. That means if someone's logged in. If the user exists, someone's logged in, then pass in the display name in my index.html. Otherwise, pass in nothing. So that's not going to, so I can say welcome user, whatever the user is. I want to do that with everything, right? So I want to modify all my routes so that they can have a display name of user here like this. Okay, so let's try that out. So I'm just going to take this, and I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go to the next line. So my products, they're going to have the same thing, right? Here are my products, and I'm going to put in on the next line here, display name, res render display list this, right? And just to keep it the same, I'm just going to put this at the end. There we go. So it looks the same as this one. And the same thing with my services. So I'm going to go back down to services. I'm going to add a comma and copy that line in there. So that way you have a display name here for services as well. Same thing with your about page. About page. Again, I'm going to kind of put this down here. Here's the title. And then underneath my title itself, I'm going to put in my display name. So that's another little property that I'm passing in when I'm logging in. I'm going from page to page. And one more thing is my contact. My contact also needs to have a display name, right? So it's not just about having logging in and getting some response messages, error flashes, and so on. but I also want to get my contact, right? So I get messages, that's cool, but I also want to kick in my display name again. So let's just do the same thing. So kind of do one of these, and I'll put messages underneath it, and then we'll put in another piece of data we're going to pass into the page contact. And this is going to work with our view engine. Our view engine is EJS. So EJS is going to take title, messages, and display name, in this case, for example, in contact, and these are just variables that are going to be available to the EJS, to the view engine there, okay? All right, so contact page is done, about page, all these pages are done. Here's my email processing. I don't have to do this as a post, so nothing to do there. Now comes the new stuff, right? But let's save what I have because I modified my page, and let's take a look and see if it reboots. And it looks like so far I haven't made an error. It's putting us back into MongoLab, which means things are probably working. And I'm looking at my index.js. I'm going to say added display name to routes. I'm going to do that. So display name is going to be part of our routing system, right? Just for these routes here, for our index.js and so on. Okay. And we're going to have to change it for the user as well, but we're adding those in there because we don't have that right now, and we will. So why am I adding display name anyway? Well, remember when I went to my models, look at this one more time. In my user model, I have display name now. I've kind of add that in. So when we create our user, we don't just create our user with username and password. We also have username, password, email, display name, and so on, just like we did last day, right? So, or the day when we were making our user model, right? That was one of the labs you guys had. So this is required, and display name is going to be generated by the user. When you create a user, the display name is going to be there, and we want to show the display name on the page when the user is logged in, but only when the user is logged in. Okay, let's go back down to index.ts. So this is the first piece, and it's working. The next piece is when we actually do our, I want to start generating, my views when I go to log in and log out and all that kind of stuff, right? I already have my views already here. So if you look at views under users, right? I have my user views, but I also have in the main root here, log in, register, those two login and register views I've already made them for you, so you don't have to make them yourself, okay? Because it takes just us typing the views in, which doesn't make any sense, right? Okay, cool. So we've got pretty much everything we need, but in here is where we're going to start typing the new routes we don't have already. So let's render, right? Let's render the login page. I think this is the first thing I want to do. So login page is going to be rendered. Okay, so when we first get there, we want to do a router.get, right? This is how we normally do it, right? And we're going to look at the login, right? And what we want to do here is we want to send in an anonymous function with request, response, and next, right? So we're going to go request, which is going to be express object dot request, and response, which is going to be an express object dot response, and then next, which is going to be of type any. And we're going to pass this in. And again, we use the fat arrow function to pass in an anonymous function, right, into our login. So this is kind of the same way we do everything we've done so far. Now here's where it gets a little crazy, right? Remember, whenever we log in, we want to have three different options. We want to have our success redirect, right? No, sorry, let me go back to that again. Sorry, I'm ahead of myself. If there's no rec user, so if user does not exist in our request, right, then what we're going to do is render the login page, right, with the following options: title, login, right, messages, and our messages are rec.flash. We're going to modify this a little bit later. Our login message. Define this. We haven't done that yet. We will. And the last piece is display name again. So we're going to display name. Remember, we did this already once, which if rec user exists, then the display name is going to be equal to rec.user.displayName, right? Otherwise, that's what the colon says. Don't send anything in, right? All right, so that's the first piece. And then what we want to do is after we're done checking that out, if that's true, return. So get us out of there, right? Just make sure we log in. That's one possibility. Else, user's already logged in, so the user exists. And if that's true, then just return res.redirect. This is important you put all the returns in the redirect. Res.redirect to the user page. So we're going to be going, when we log in, we'll go to the administration section for our users in this particular application. Okay, cool. So that's the first piece. If you're logged in, you're going to go to users. Otherwise, you know what? If you're not logged in, you're going to log in. You're going to go to the login screen. Let's test this functionality out. And again, if you notice, it's already rebooted. I'm going to go back into my screen here, and I'm going to start typing login, right? So I'm going to say login, press enter. And if it works, I get my login screen. Hey, if I click register, though, it's going to be a 404 because we haven't done that route yet. And I can't press login. First of all, even if I type in information here, username. Notice also we got username and password for login. That's cool. Register has more stuff that we have to. We'll log in with username and password. When we register, we get more information. Okay, so we can log in with a username and a password. I'm just going to show you this. And if we click log in, I'm going to give you a 404 because it doesn't know how to handle a post right now. All it knows how to handle is a get, which means it's just going to render the login page. It's not going to actually do anything with it yet. Okay. And also notice that we're kind of hanging out here in space. Eventually, not this week, but maybe next week, as we continue this demo. Right now, the login page is on its own. And my login page is kind of sitting here on the left. What I may want to do is add it in so it kind of appears in the middle with maybe some kind of logo in the middle and stuff like this. This stuff that I'll be editing, and I'll modify my login page as we go. Okay, cool. So my login page is done and it renders. Let's update GitHub. So we're going to go here. And we're going to say, here's our index.ts. We're going to say added login, the render route, get route. So login, get route. Okay, we're doing. So we can see the login page will render now. Push. All right, cool. Let me just go to concept board here because I've kind of gone for a while. I want to see if everyone has any questions. And people say, no, there's everything fine. I got a couple people that are still happening right here that are kind of following along, that are part of it, but it looks like people have gone to coffee and haven't come back. That's cool. I understand that because, again, the college is closed right now. So you're probably going to watch this later on, right? You're not going to watch it right now because it doesn't make sense because you're not at the college. But that's okay. I'm still thinking that, hey, just in case you guys decide to be online, I'm here to support you and answer your questions. Okay, cool. So that's part one. Let's get into the next piece. And again, I don't want to go too long with this one because I want to kind of do different parts and then take a short break. Right now, we've been going for about half an hour, and let's get the next piece in there. So we're going to stop this one, and let's do the rendering for the sign up page. So we'll say render the registration page. So registration page. We're rendering that one. And we're going to do some similar stuff here. A registration page is still going to be a router.get. And instead of login, we're going to put in register, right? So register is going to be the thing that we're going to do. And what we're going to do for here is similar to what we've done. I'm just going to copy paste in this case. I'm going to kind of grab all this and put this over here. So we're going to do request response, all that stuff. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a space for us to create our route. Here's what it looks like. Right, request response. And inside our registration, it's going to look very similar to what we've done with the login. In fact, it should be almost identical, right? So let's copy some of the same stuff. We're still going to check if the user's logged in. If the user's logged in, there's no need to register him. So we're going to kind of get all this stuff and put it over here. But instead of us going to res render login, we're going to res render register. And the title, of course, is going to be register. And rec flash is going to be the register message, right? This is important. So here's our register message, right? Make sure the messaging is all correct. Display name is the same. We're still going to return. And instead of redirecting to users, we just registered. We're going to redirect back to the main screen, right? So it's going to register, and it'll log you in, basically, is what we're going to do when we register. The first time. Let's take you back to the registration page. Thank you for registering is what it should say. So again, we can modify some of these routes users and the redirect here as we see fit, and we will as we go forward, as we add Angular. Okay, so registration is done. Let's test it. So we'll save everything, wait for everything to reboot. Looks like we have rebooted. And if I go up to here and I go to instead of where it says login, and if I put in register, enter, we got our user registration. So now you can see that the registration form is pretty simple. It includes email, username, password, and display name. Those are the pieces that are here. Okay. All right, cool. So that's the next piece. Let's go back into this and put up another one on GitHub. So we modified, so added registration get route. So the get route, which means we're just going to render it. So push. So we've got that updated to GitHub. So we can see the login and registration, but we can't do anything yet. Okay. And before we do the login piece, I want to talk about another piece we want to do. We want to be able to do log out, right? That's an easy one to put in, right? So log out is actually quite simple, right? What we're going to do, we're going to register this one. So, you know, this is a get. So we're going to process the logout request. That's what it's going to be. So any logout request, we're going to process that. We're going to go router.get, and it's going to be logout. When someone goes to log out, right? Again, we're going to do this request response thing without an any. Copy this, put it in here, get rid of the any because we don't need this any anymore. So we're going to log out, right? What we're going to do here with this anonymous function, okay, here we go, is it's going to be very simple actually. What we want to do here is just go rec.logout, right? That's the first thing we're going to do. And once we log out, we want to redirect res.redirect, right, to the root, which is our landing page. So redirect back to the landing page. That's what this thing does. That's it for our logout. So logout, when we type this, it'll log us out and put us back to the landing page. Actually, this will actually work. If I look right now, I mean, even though we're not logged in, we can still process a logout, even though if we're not logged in, and see how we restarted everything. And if I go back to here and I put log out, it's going to take us back to the main page. Log out. Enter. Boom, we're at the main page. Why? It processed the logout request, but we're never logged in, so it just took us back to the page anyway. Nothing, it didn't cause any error. If you look, there's still no error, just rendered that page. Okay? So that's kind of cool. That works. So we've got, you know, we've rendered a login, register, and we put in our logout. Let's put that into our GitHub. So added, you know, logout root. We've done. Push. Lots of little pushes. Okay, let's start cracking out the registration piece, because the registration is the most difficult piece to get going. If you can't register a user, then we're going to have other issues. You can't even log in with the user. So let's do this piece. So we're going to say process registration page, registration request. That's what we're going to do here. We're going to process the request. And this starts off pretty simply, right? This is the post request that we're going to make instead of a get. Remember, gets, render, posts, process, right? So we're going to do a router.post, right? And we're going to send it back to the registration page, the register. So when someone posts from the register page, right, with the form data, we're going to do, again, we need this request response any thing. It's just an anonymous function that passes in router request and response, right? And inside my anonymous little function here, again, I'm just going to kind of make some room for you guys to see this. Here's our post. What I want to do is I want to be able to log in, or sorry, register. And the registration piece is I'm going to try and register the user. So attempt to register the user, the first thing. So this is the first thing. So here's some pseudocode, attempt to register user. Now, the reason why I say attempt is because sometimes the user exists. Like if you try and register the same user twice, that's no good, right? So we have to access the user object. When I say user, notice how when we included user, we can access it now, right? Dot register, right? Because this is part of user register works because we've extended the user model to include Passport local mongoose, right? And we're going to pass in a new user object, right? Now, this is where we get a little hairy. I'm going to open up the user object here. Here's my new user object. And the new user object is going to be, if you remember, an object that looks like this, right? The first piece to the user object is my username, right? So username is going to be, we're going to get that from a request.body.username, right? And the next one, of course, is our password. So we have to talk about this. This is going to mess this up a little bit. Request.body.password. Now we can ignore it. If I don't want to register the username this way, the password, I don't have to. Registration happens the way I want it to happen. And if I do it this way, it's going to register the password as an example. It's going to save the password back to the file, but it's going to save it back and it's going to be unhashed. I'm going to try and do both. I want to show you what I'm talking about here. So here's our password for now. And here's my email. I'm going to continue doing this typing so you understand where I'm going. So body.email. This is going with our user model, right? And the last piece that I have to put in is my display name. So display name, which is rec.body.display name. There we go. Body display name. Okay, cool. And that kind of shores up this piece. So the user model is going to have, it's going to pass on this object, right? But before we can finish this interaction, what we need to do, right? And again, this will pass in this piece right here. And again, it's kind of, you know, the brackets are really important here. So I'm going to pass this down here for a second. What we need to do here is add in another. We're going to check the passwords. We're going to actually pass in the password to hash. So we're going to say rec, passing in twice actually, rec.body.password, right? Because rec.body.password, pass it in here, this registers the password because this is part of our user model, right? And here, what we're doing is if we don't pass this piece in here, then this rec.body.password, what ends up happening is it won't function. And the reason why is in our user model, we've made our password required. So if we don't put it in right here like that, it'll fail. It won't render, right? So we have to fix that later on. Okay. We're also going to we're going to pass in an anonymous function that's going to include error checking. So here's our error check that we're going to do. We're going to say like this. We're going to start off like this. We're going to say console.log just to see what kind of error we get. You know, it's going to be error inserting data for some reason or another. Error inserting new data because maybe we have the same user, or maybe, right, as an example, instead of the same user, we don't have that. We have some other problem. Maybe it doesn't work. So if error.name, we're going to check the error name. That's part of our error object. Our error object is loaded with a name, right? So if error name example is equal to, and this is part of our error object, user exists, it'll be this exact same, right? Exists error. If that's the kind of error that we're getting, well then, what do I want to do? I want to say something like this. I want to say, if my user exists, then rec.flash, this is our flash message that we're setting up, register message, right, is equal to registration error user power. User already exists. There we go. So that's that registration message we're going to put in. So if you use the registration type of error, then we're going to change our rec flash to have that happen. That's the first thing we're going to do. And then what we're going to do is, if there is an error at all, we're going to return and res.render the registration page, register page again. And what we're going to pass into this is our title, which is going to be register, and messages. Notice I'm just rendering the whole thing again. I could have passed it back to the registration, but I won't for now. For now, you'll see why. Rec flash, and we're going to say is register message. Right, so that's our register message we're passing back. And then the display name, what we've done before, which is rec.user. If rec.user exists, then rec.user.display name is going to be passed in. Otherwise, we're going to pass in nothing. Now that probably won't happen because that means that we won't register, because chances are you will never have this. The display name will always be blank because there's no way that it's going to happen. We've left it in there for compatibility. Okay, let's go back into here. And what about if registration is successful? So that's when registration fails. So this is what happens if I got a problem. So if the error exists, if some kind of error exists, right? Then if that's true on error, error inserting data is going to come out because, and I got to make sure that, did I miss something? Yeah. Yep, I did. It's got to be here, actually. Let's go to this. I kind of skipped a step. And this is where I have to check everything because typing errors. If the error exists, that's the first thing we got to do. Then I got a console log, right, of this. I got to put that in here. So it's only going to show the error if something wrong, error inserting data. And then what I want to put in is that this piece, if error name is true, then put that in there. So check to see what the error is. Let's format the code. And of course, it won't format in this case because we've got such complicated code layers. And then inside our error, we want to do this piece. So take this piece here and cut it out. And so we know we have an error and we have a problem. And this is what it's going to display this issue, right? Because there we go. So we're going to display this. So if there's a problem, then what I wanted to do is, display this error, register the error, go back to the registration page and show the flash. That's what I want to do. All right. Okay, and this is the key. What if? So this is if there's an error. But what if? And notice that this is the error itself. So it kind of comes out here. What if registration is okay? Right. So what if registration is successful? Well, that would go in here. If registration is successful, and let's just combine these two pieces like so. All right, so if registration is successful, well, that's cool. Well, what happens now? So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say return, and if it's successful, return passport.authenticate, right? And we're going to pass in local, right? The local authentication scheme. And what we're going to do is pass in some values, right? We're going to pass in the request object and the response object and pass in an anonymous function that helps us deal with the authentication, right? So what am I going to do if I'm authenticated? Res.redirect to the right place, which is users for now. That's where we're going to put everyone who's authenticated. So registration is successful, authenticate the user with local authentication, pass in a request response into our authentication, right? And then redirect the user to the user's website, all right? The user's landing page, right? Which is going to be our user administration page. Poof. And that's our registration in a nutshell. We can actually test this now if it works. One is, let's see if this compiles. It does. This is good. Connected to MongoLab is a good sign. I'm going to go here and I'm going to start actually doing my registration page. So I'm going to say register. I'm going to put in my email. So I'm going to say tom@example.com. Right? And my username will be, Tom. There you go. Passport 12345. And my display name is just Tom. Right? So it's very simple. Click submit. If things will go well, as soon as I click submit, we should take us to the users page, right? So do and users. Hey, we just registered a user and it worked, right? Now we're considered logged in because we've authenticated, okay? Once you've authenticated, not only did we go in, we're actually logged in, right? So if I was trying to register again, right? User already exists. If I go to register and press enter, it's going to take us back to my home page because I'm already logged in. The only way I'm going to know I'm not logged in for users to work, even login, if I go login, press enter, it's going to still take us back to users because we're already logged in, okay? But if I go log out, now I'm logged out. And if I go to my users page, so I click on my users page, well, that's a problem, isn't it? The reason why it's a problem is because we haven't modified our users routes to prevent people who aren't logged in from getting there. Okay, so that's kind of next piece. So registration is working because we've got this information. And if we check up online on MongoLab, right? So again, remember MongoLab is being hosted on Heroku for me, right? So if I go to Heroku, and when I go to Mongo demo, this one on Heroku, and I check out MongoLab, right? It's going to take me to my Sandbox account. And in my Sandbox account, I'm going to notice that there is, as soon as it brings up MongoLab, yay, here it is. Here's my user info, and I have one user, which I just logged that in. Let's take a look at that. And there's my user, and look, here's the hash, right? So it's kind of cool. I've got this big passport hash that I was expecting from before, but I got a problem. I've got my display name, my email, and a clear text password, which I want to get rid of. So we're going to work on this later. First piece is just getting this piece done, this username and password stuff and the salt that we're getting. And all this stuff is working. I'm happy with this piece, and it looks like registration is a go, right? So that's good. Let's skip out of MongoLab and get out of Heroku for now. But user registration works, and that means I can kind of upload that to GitHub. So I'm going to go here, add that in, and say added register processing. This is what it is. And I go in and push, and that now my registration piece is done. Okay. So again, if you were to look at this, what I've done, first thing I do is I call up the user.register method, and register is built into the passport local mongoose method that's passed into the user model, right? Because I've added the passport local mongoose as a plugin or an extension of the user model. That's all I've done is extend the user model to include that. That's one. And then I generate my user, my new user right here. Here it is. And then I pass in into my rec body, my password, my username, and so on. If I don't do this, what's going to happen is because my user model, if I go back to my user model, notice my user model password is required, right? Password is required. Because I have this in here, right, required, right, that means I have to generate a password every single time I do it, which is bad for me because, yes, I want a password, but I need to authenticate that at the front end, not the back end. Here, I'm making sure that my user is adhering to the back end requirement. So my model, my Mongo schema, is making me set up a password, and it's making me do that on the user route. So if I go to my index, it's making me do this, which is not what I want. I don't want to do this. I only want to pass in my password here so I can get hashed properly. Otherwise, I'm going to have a clear text password, which is going to go outside the lines of my the reason why I'm doing this hash in the first place. Again, hashing is just a method we use to encrypt our password. Okay. All right, so let's finish up authentication here, and then we'll take a short break, and we'll come back with the next piece. So we've done registration. That's cool. We need to process our login request, right? So then we can take a short break, and we can come back and do the next piece. Okay, so let's try this out. So we've got our process our login request. And actually, this is quite easy, but it's a little broken, and we're going to fix it next week. So we're going to say process login request. Here's our process my login request. And we're going to say router.post, just like we did last time, login. So when we try and log in, I want to authenticate right away, passport authenticate, right? And we're going to pass in the local schema with some details, some details about how what we do when we authenticate. So on success, so if I go success redirect, right? Redirect. On success, right? What I want to do is I want to go to users. Okay. On failure redirect. This is right from Passport, right? Actually, the original Passport. Go to login. Go back to login. So if I can't log in, keep me at the login page. And then failure flash is equal to true. And what this does is it says, hey, if I fail to log in, send a message back to the login page to show me that I've got a problem logging in. There's a reason why. Is it because I've got a wrong password or a wrong username? If I'm not registered, something is going to take me back here. Okay, so let's test this thing. So I've got this piece I've saved. I'm going to go back out to here, and looks like I've rebooted. Let's log in, and I'm going to log in as Tom with a password of 12345. Can I get in there, right? So let's try this out. So I'm going to go back to login, right? And Tom with the password of 12345. When I click login, if everything goes well, then it should take me, redirect me back to users. Now I'm logged in. If I try and log in again, it still redirect me to users because I'm already logged in. But if I log out, now that I'm logged out, and if I try and log in again, it'll allow me to log in. So login and registration, guys, this is the most difficult piece. It's working. So I'm going to update GitHub. So we're going to go here, and I'm going to add in, so process, so added login processing. Push. What this does, everything is there. So log in, log out, all these pieces are there, and I've got, for the most part, all my routes working. Let's take, we're kind of halfway through now, a little bit. We got about another hour and a half to go. Let's take a short break, 10 or 15 minutes, say 15 minutes, and when we come back, we'll talk about the next pieces. We have to fix some of the views to make sure that they work properly. I'm just going to go, before I stop this, I'm going to go back to concept board and see if there's any other questions. So far, I don't see a question. So it says, oh, I do say a question. Hold on a second. It says, is logout function from the passport module? Yes, it is. That's the answer. Yes. So yes, Lucy, the logout function comes from the passport module. And that's a good question. Okay, so that's you know, that's kind of how we do it. I'm supposed to reply, yes, it is. Save. Okay, so if no one else has any questions, and I'll just wait for a second because there's a bit of a lag, we'll take a short break, 10 or 15 minutes. So right now it's 2:37. So let's say 2:47 and 5. Let's say by 2:50 or 2:55, we'll come back and we'll continue. All right. Thanks so much for being patient today on this crazy ice day, and we'll get back at 2:55.